Okay, so now I want to talk about the PaintFX tool in Maya. This is something that has been around for quite a few versions, and there's probably even a video or two elsewhere on this channel that talks about it. But a couple of disclaimers beforehand, and I've told you this without recording, but now I'm recording it, so I'll say it again. The PaintFX tools are great for adding some background detail, but they're not, at least not all of them are very great for close-up detail. They do also rely on some old small image texture sizes and the Maya software renderer. So in order to use them in Arnold, I mean, they will render in Arnold, as we'll see, but if you want them to look better, it requires a little bit of extra work. But that being said, I think there's enough value here to show you what it can do. So, PaintFX tool is a way to kind of paint geometry, and there's a bunch of different options you'll see, but I tend to use it almost exclusively for adding greenery, so grass, plants, bushes, trees, things of that nature. No pun intended. So to get to the PaintFX tool, you need to go to Generate and Get Brush right down here. When you do that, this content browser is going to open up, and you're going to see a bunch of colors. And this list on the side, you can see there's a PaintFX section. There's also a modeling section, so if you want to see, there's some like sculpting base meshes, vehicle base meshes, props, and things of that nature, which we never really talk about. But PaintFX is what we're actually focused on, and I'm going to start down here. Where is it? We got flowers and flowers mesh, and we've got grasses, and we have plants and plants mesh, and we have trees and trees mesh. So I'm going to go to plants mesh. I'm just going to start with this leafy palm here. See palmleafy.mel. And you can see a little preview of what that's going to look like. It won't be quite so pixelated. All right, this isn't Minecraft. But we select that, and now we've got this PaintFX tool. And now I'm just going to draw on my ground plane, and now we have a bunch of little palms popping up. Okay. Now if I add some lights, and I'm just going to take the shortcut and add a Arnold sun and sky. By the way, if you don't like seeing this black background of your Arnold sun and sky, you can actually just scale the whole thing down to 0. And you'll still get the effects of it, but it won't be obnoxiously blocking your scene. So now if I hit render in Arnold, you'll see nothing. And that's because these aren't actually geometry. They're just kind of instances. They're PaintFX instances. So what you need to do is select them, go to create, not create, that's wrong. Go to modify, convert, and then PaintFX to polygons. And there's some options here, but I'm just going to go with the, we'll say quad output, and click convert. Great. Now we have polygons, and immediately that changed. So I'm going to undo the conversion, if it'll let me. There we go. So I undid the conversion, no render, convert to polygons, and it's not coming back. Of course, it's not going to do it that way. We undo. Okay. So PaintFX, no render. Go to modify, convert, PaintFX to polygons. There they go. Okay, so now we have some greenery, and what you can do, now that it's polygons, is you can do all the things that you would normally do to polygons, you can do to these. If you need to go into face mode, and let's say we select these, and you just need to separate, you can do that, and then I can go here, face, separate, okay, and now I can take these things and combine them into their own mesh. Alright, I can move, I can rotate, I can scale, I can modify the mesh if I want to. I wouldn't modify it too much because the textures are already mapped. But you can make adjustments however you want. Now this, again, it gets you some detail, but if we zoom in here real close, we kind of look at it, there's not a whole lot of actual detail on the textures. Alright, so they don't look great up close. Also, the material itself is just kind of weirdly shiny and not super accurate. So let me see if I can get a good angle on this view here. Okay. I'm going to select this and just separate it out so it's its own thing, because I want to give it its own there you go, mesh combine. Okay, I just made it its own thing because I want to give it its own materials. So actually probably be easier to just redraw. There we go. Oops. PaintFX, come on. There we go. Okay. So here are my new plants. Again, oh, that's right. Modify, convert, PaintFX to polygons. I want these to look better. What we need to do, and we'll talk more about the material side of this in the coming weeks, but I'm going to open up the Hypershade. I have my palm leaves selected. You can see what that actual image texture looks like, and you can tell not a super high quality texture. But at the very least, what we can do is give it a better shader, because right now it's weirdly glossy and no leaves, or it looks like the hood of a car, and that's wrong. So I'm going to, this is the Palm 2 leaf shader. Let's make these a little bit bigger so I can figure out which one is which. So this one, I'm going to graph the network, and you can see it is using, we got our image texture, a ramp node, the shader, and it's just a Fong shader, but we want to use an Arnold shader. So I'm going to create a new shader and just the Arnold standard surface, and I'm going to move it over here, and all I'm going to do is bring this out color. Here, let me make this a little bit larger so you can see it. Move some things around. Okay, so I'm in the node panel. I had my Arnold shader, and we've got this out color from the ramp, and it's going into the color of the shader, of the Fong shader here. I just want to bring that out color into the base color here of my Arnold shader, and then we'll call this new shader, new leaf. Okay, so we've made that. Now all we have to do is, let's see if I can keep all the windows visible at the same time, is select those, select those leaves, go to assign existing material, new leaf, and now you can see they already look better, right? Because it's using the Arnold shader, so they're just a little bit more vibrant. Now they're still super shiny, but that just means we have to go into the Hypershade and turn down that specular color, or excuse me, the specular weight here, and maybe increase the roughness a bit. Okay. And now, without having to worry too much about textures and UV unwrapping, all we're doing is telling it, instead of being a Phong shader, it's going to be an Arnold shader. And I'll bring that weight back up a little bit, get some highlights in there. And now it looks that much better. So that's the real basics of it. I'll quickly show a couple other things. So I'm going to just delete all that crap. Okay. The grass is really nice. Although I should also mention that because you're adding a bunch of polygons very quickly, it's easy to add a ridiculous amount of polygons to your scene and really slow down the render times, right? Because now I've just added all of this grass. I'm going to go to edit, or excuse me, modify, convert, PaintFX to polygons, and then we'll hit render, and that looks just terrible. Let's not do grass bent. Let's do grass clump. There we go. Grass clump looks a lot better. Modify, convert to polygons. Okay, and there's what that grass clump looks like. Again, it's definitely worth it to go into the graph network. And it's not, you don't have to do much. All you have to do is show that materials, the existing materials graph network, add a standard surface shader, reroute the color, name it, and then apply. And it's going to look a lot better. But it's also just a ton of polygons. So in this little clump, it is, let's see how many polygons that is. We have 5,000 faces in this little clump, which takes up that much screen real estate. If you've got a giant room, you know, and you just see a little bit out the window, that's quite a bit. So be careful with it. But it can do that. One last PaintFX thing that I want to show is going to be a tree. So if we go to trees mesh, let's say autumn oak. And here, it's going to work a little bit differently. If I click and drag, as I drag, the tree grows. Right, a second tree doesn't add. If I want to add another tree, I need to click and drag again, but I don't want to add another tree. Okay, so here, again, we need to convert to polygons. All right, now we can take a close look, and the way that this is working is the trunk has its own texture, and you can see that the mesh is not super clean. But the leaves are all image planes with transparency. Or not image planes, but they're polygon planes. Just a couple of very simple polygons. And then a transparent image texture is placed on top. But Arnold does not like that. Does not like rendering that, at least not immediately. So you got to do a little bit of extra work to get this to work. So we'll go back to Hypershade, and we're going to go through the same initial leaf process that we did with the grass and the plants. So we've got, this is Oak Autumn Leaves. We're going to graph that network. We're going to add a shader. And I'm going to grab the same thing that's going to the color, put it in there. And we'll select those leaves. Assign the material. And then there's this opacity down here, which is what we need to deal with. And so we need to take this out alpha from the image texture. Okay, I hope this doesn't get too confusing. Again, that's the nice thing about videos. You can rewind and watch it again. But we can take the out alpha, which is the alpha channel, and plug that into the opacities of our new shader. Oops. There we go. And I'm going to call this new tree leaf. Okay. And then the last thing that we need to do, again, this is a little bit different, is we need to go to the attribute editor on this shader, and we need to, under, let's see, I gotta remember where it's located. Alright, so you need to select the object. You need to go in the attribute editor to the shape node. Okay, it's the one that ends in shape. And then go down to the Arnold section. And there's this little checkbox that says opaque. And we need to uncheck that. When we do that, now we get transparency. Okay, so it's looping in the out alpha from the texture into the opacity RGB channels, and then going to the shape tab and turning off the opaque check mark. And now we've got leaves that are leaf shaped and not boxy. And of course, from a distance, you can't really tell that much. But it's there, and it's a halfway decent background tree. So, again, more ways to help fill out your scene with relatively little effort.